Corporale? Is that how you say it? How do you say it? It's gonna be so good. Fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic. Hello and welcome. I'm Jessie, the sleepy koala, because I'm Australian and perpetually tired. Today, I would like to do a review of the book Six of Crows. There's a lot of reviews out there of this book. It's very popular as a YA fantasy, but I read it recently and I loved it and I wanted to talk about it. So hey, I will throw another review out into the ocean of other reviews. So I'm going to split this video into two parts. The first part will be non-spoilers. The second part will be spoilers because there's lots of things I wish to talk about that are spoilers, so I can't just do a non-spoiler review. So I heard of Six of Crows before the Shadow and Bone TV show came out. I didn't realize it was in the same universe though, and I heard people talking just before the show came out about how the crows would be in the show and they were from Six of Crows, and it got me really interested in it. But I didn't pick up the book until after watching the show, and I loved the show. I thought the crows were fantastic and was very, very excited to read Six of Crows afterwards, even though I knew it wasn't the same story. But I definitely went into this book really loving particular characters. Jesper, Kaz, and Nej, like those three were absolutely phenomenal in the show. I enjoyed watching them so much. I was looking forward to reading more of them, finding out more about who they were, about their secrets. I wasn't as interested in Nina and Matthias, but I must say, by the end of this book, I fell in love with Nina. She is fantastic. She is witty. She is funny. It's so great to watch her flirt with everyone. And she just approaches situations in such an interesting way, and I love it. I loved her so much after the book, even though I didn't really care much for her after the show. I don't dislike Matthias, and Wyland is also in this this basket. Like, I don't dislike them, but definitely by the end of the book, I can't say I loved them. They were fine. I thought they was fine in the book, and that was really about the level of my thoughts on them. I am looking forward to seeing what's in the next book and seeing what happens with the character growth, particularly with Matthias and Wyland, but also all the other characters, because I do love them and I'd love to have more of them. So I think the one thing about this book that didn't quite resonate with me was the pacing felt a bit off. And I think this is because the start of the book, well, really the start and the middle of the book, are so character focused, and I'm going into a heist story. I'm expecting something a little bit more fast paced. And I love the character work. I think Bardugo does a wonderful job at really putting us into the characters' minds, which I will talk about a lot more later when I get into the spoiler section. But at the same time, it didn't feel like we were doing anything a lot of the time. It felt like we were only doing the character work, which I'm a character reader. I do love character work. But I felt like we were promised a little bit more plot than we got in the first 2/3 of the book. But the last third, I loved it. That it had all of the fast-paced plot that I was expecting from a heist story, and it was wonderful. And by that point, I was so in love with the characters that I was just on the edge of my seat the whole time, trying to follow what was going along and like not wanting them to get hurt and just hoping everything turned out fine and like watching everything unfold. So just for me, the first 2/3 of the book, I think on a reread, it would probably be completely fine because I'm expecting it. But I would say if you're watching this and you haven't read the book and you're interested in reading it, just be aware that it is a bit slower to start because it is meant to be more focused on characters. And then at the end, it does get a lot more fast paced. So if you enjoy those things, I definitely recommend this book because this book was absolutely wonderful and I loved it so much. A quick synopsis of the plot of the book. We have a motley crew of 6 different people from different backgrounds. They're all morally great characters in some way. They get hired to steal something from another nation, and it's all to do with this drugs that is introduced in the book that affects the magic users, Grisha. We follow them along their journey, and along the way we also get flashbacks from several characters to give more depth to their character and their reactions to certain events that happen in the modern timeline. The book is very character focused, particularly for the start of it, and the end of it is very plot focused when they finally get to doing the heist and going through the motions to recover what they are trying to steal and get out alive. So we have 6 main characters in the book. The first is Kaz, who is a magician of sorts. He is very good at picking locks, and he is quite mysterious in the way that he is almost a mob boss, but also a middle manager at the same time. He wears these gloves that are brought into focus quite early on, and to pose the question of why does he wear these? And throughout the book, we get more and more about him, and he is one of the characters who get a flashback sequence that explains a lot about who he is and where he's coming from. The next character is Inej. She is a spy. She takes secrets. She's known as the Wraith in the book, but is also considered to be a spider because she is able to get in and out of places and learn things in ways that a lot of other people can't. She has a background as an acrobat, and I both love this because I used to do circus performing when I was in university, but also because that's just such a good backstory and fits so well with the characterization of someone who becomes a spy and like scales walls and does all of these crazy things to get information, and it all makes so much sense as a backstory of why she can do this and already has these skills. After that, we have got 2 characters that I'll just talk about together. We've got Nina and then we've got Matthias. They are connected through a plot that happened in a backstory. And in the modern story, Nina is trying to help recover Matthias from prison, and then he goes along with them on the journey, even though he does not trust Nina anymore and has a lot of negative feelings towards her. But he is quite integral to the place that they are breaking into because it is within his home country. Our 5th character is Jesper, who is so much fun. He is a gunslinger and he is also a chronic gambler, and he constantly is moving about. He has so much energy, and it's really easy to picture him not sitting still or really having trouble sitting still in a lot of these situations where they just have to wait. But Jesper is the character who is the comic relief. He's cracking jokes, he's bantering with other people in the crew. One of the things that I absolutely love is when Jesper and Kaz start bantering, because Kaz is a very serious, dark, stoic person, but I think it is a great show of trust, and even though they wouldn't call it friendship, that they are able to have these moments between them. So I love those scenes, and I really think Jesper is a great character. I do think I like Jesper more because I've seen the Shadow and Bone show. He is fantastic in the show. Kit Young does so much justice to the performance of this really charming, witty guy who is just able to like sidle up to anyone and become their friend and get some information out of them, but also get in trouble all the time because of his gambling addiction. I do think this affected the way that I saw him in the book, and if I hadn't seen the show, I don't think I would have disliked Jesper, but I do think his charisma comes across better in the show than in the book. But either way, I do still love him as a character after reading the book. The last character is Wyland. He is someone who works with explosives, and he plays a very integral part in the mission that I don't want to talk about yet because it is a spoiler. And he and Jesper have great chemistry together. The one thing about the characters that is, I would not say this is a problem, it is just the way that I read it. All the characters in this book are 16, 17. It's YA. They're meant to be teenagers. That's who it's marketed towards. As an older reader, I did age them up in my head. It made more sense to me when they were their mid to late 20s, that they were at this point in their lives. But that was just me reading it, and that made it more enjoyable for me. But honestly, I think if I was reading this as a teenager, I'd totally be into it with them being teenagers, because that's who I am at that age. And I think a lot of people tend to read characters or picture them around their own age. It's just much easier that way. So I think it's completely fine that they're teenagers. That's who they're marketed towards. The teenagers are probably going to read them and think it's completely fine. Just for me, I did age them up in my head, and that did make it a little bit more enjoyable for me to read. I think coming into this duology after watching the show was helpful, because I already knew a bit about the magic in the universe, and some of the comments that I've heard about reading Six of Crows before reading the original Grisha trilogy, Shadow and Bone, is that the magic can be a bit confusing, because Six of Crows does really assume that you know what's going on. I think you can still read it without having watched the show or read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but it's something where, like, if you want to know about the magic, this is not the book to really learn about it. But in saying that, there is some fantastic applications of the magic system in this book that I absolutely loved. Now I'm going to go into the spoiler section, so if you don't want spoilers, stop now. Don't keep going. Spoilers. That going to be spoilers from this point out. So first, oh my god, I just want to talk about Kaz and his backstory and how much it plays into how he thinks, how he feels, and like some of the scenes, how he acts. It's just such a good backstory, and how the reasoning why he wears gloves, why he doesn't like touching people, like the writing of him being on that barge with all of these dead bodies around, and then having to use his brother's body to get back to Ketterdam. Oh my god, like I completely understand why he doesn't like the feeling of skin on skin after having to touch a bunch of dead bodies. Like that's some trauma right there. This boy's got some trauma in his past that he has not dealt with. And I love the scene where they're taking over the prison wagon, and he wasn't expecting them all to be standing and to be all pushed in together, and just has a panic attack. And it was just written so well, of seeing the third person from, who was it? Someone else's point of view of him at the wagon, and he just stops. And they're like, why is this happening? Why are you just stopping? But then it goes into his point of view, and we actually get to have his thoughts and how he's trying to deal with this. These passages of watching Kaz stand outside of the wagon, it's just, Inej tensed, waiting for the signal. It didn't come. Kaz was just standing there, staring into the wagon. "What's happening?" whispered Wyland. "Maybe they aren't hooded," she replied. From the side, she couldn't see. "I'll go." They couldn't all bunch up around the back of the cart at once. Inej climbed out of the gully and came up behind Kaz. He was still standing there, perfectly still. She touched his shoulder briefly, and he flinched. Kaz Brecker flinched. That's such good description of someone freaking out and like freezing and having that fight or flight response, but then having the freeze response, and he just shuts down until she touches him. And of course that's the worst thing that could happen at that moment, because that's all he can probably be thinking about is those buddies and the touching. When he wakes up, it's just in the prison wagon. Kaz woke to a sharp jab against his thigh. He was ice cold and in darkness. There were bodies all around him, pressing against his back, his sides. He was drowning in corpses. To get the flashback scene of him on the boat and swimming to shore with his brother's body, to then follow it up with this scene in the wagon, was so well done. It just adds so much depth to Kaz's character, and God, did it hit me in the feels. I already liked Kaz at the beginning, and just getting a tragic backstory, that's my jam. I love a good tragic backstory and a sad boy. And oh God, just Kaz needs some therapy. Like really badly needs some therapy. And then there's the whole thing with him getting revenge on Pekka Rollins for this scam that he pulled on Kaz and his brother. And yeah, his motivations make sense. That's something I love about this book. The motivations of the characters make sense as to what they're doing. Another character that I love being in the head of, Inej, there was some fantastic scenes where she had to do things, and there was just such raw emotion that came from those scenes. Like particularly the one where she's climbing the chute and the fire is going at the bottom and she doesn't know if she's gonna make it, and then her shoes are melting to her feet, and there's just been so much talk about how much these shoes mean to Inej, and now they're being a hindrance. And oh God, it was, you kind of know that she's gonna make it. Like, you know that it's gonna continue. I don't know, maybe she dies, but that didn't seem like the scene where someone just dies. But the way that Bardugo writes characters in their own POV, it doesn't matter if you know she's going to make it to the top, because her fear, her like absolute terror, her wanting to let go and having to keep pushing herself is portrayed so well. And you can feel the character's emotions coming through. And as someone who really empathizes with characters a lot, I was terrified for her. And I felt so bad for her that she had to go through this, and just wished I could do something, even though I know it's a book and she's a character in a book and I can't help a character in a book. But these scenes were fantastic. The heat of the incinerator wrapped around Inej like a living thing. A desert dragon in his den, hiding from the ice, waiting for her. She knew her body's limits, and she knew she had no more to give. She'd made a bad wager. It was as simple as that. The autumn leaf might cling to its branch, but it was already dead. The only question was when it would fall. Let go, Inej. Her father had taught her to climb, to trust the rope, the swing, and finally to trust her own skill, to believe that as she leapt, she would reach the other side. Would he be waiting for her there? She thought of her knives hidden away aboard the Ferrolind. Maybe they could go to some other girl who dreamed of being dangerous. She whispered their names: Peter, Mara, Anastasia, Vladimir, Lizabeta, Sancta Alina, martyred before she could turn 18. Let go, Inej. Should she jump now or simply wait for her body to give out? It's such good description of how Inej is feeling at that point, and how much she just wants to give up. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like, obviously not the exact scene where you're climbing a chimney chute, but that feeling of something being too hard and having to push through it till you get to the other side. That's a hard thing to do. And passages like that just resonated with me because that's something I struggle with. And I think that's something that everyone really struggles with. Something that I didn't pick at all and I loved. I mean, of course, it didn't come up in the Shadow and Bone show because it's set before Six of Crows, so maybe it'll come up in a sequel in season 2 or something. But Jesper being Grisha, amazing. And I love that he, well, love is maybe the wrong word, but the fact that he keeps this a secret to the point where he tries to just distance himself from it completely, to the point that he doesn't even seem to think about it. It's like he's put it in a box in his mind and closed that box. And then he has to drag it back out because that's what's needed on the job. And Kaz knows that, and Jasper knows that, and they out him as a Grisha, and like he doesn't want that. But it's just so fascinating, particularly because I'm still a bit confused what fabricators really do and like the difference between a fabricator and a corporale. I'm still a bit confused about how all of this works, but that's okay. I don't need to know magic systems inside and out to enjoy the book. I thought it was fantastic. So I really liked how the magic was incorporated into the story. So I don't mind stories where magic is just used and characters just fly around or they can do this or do that. But it is really, really cool when the magic is used in a very interesting way that intersects with the plot. And there's 2 things that happen in Six of Crows to do this. The first, I think, is Nina taking the param when they're trying to escape. And I think it was set up really well that QE still had a little bit of the param that he takes with him and happens to have at the time that it is needed. And they already know how much damage a Heartrender can do with the param, or at least the readers know. And knowing that the enemy also had a Heartrender, that they were given param, but Nina having to take that risk of if she takes it once, maybe she won't get addicted, but maybe she will. But it's their only way to get through the soldiers and get on the boat and run away. And it was horrifying that she was in that position, but also was very heroic of her to take that sacrifice for the people in her team, for the people that she really cares about. And I just love that that was incorporated into the story, not only like the actual drug being something more than a prop that's used in the world building and in the overall concept, but it was actually incorporated into the plot a lot more with our main characters. But then also with Nina being a Heartrender and knowing what she can do with that. And I just can't wait to see what happens going forward. Like, does she get addicted? Does she recover? Can she, like, does it affect her powers still? It's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. The other fantastic way that I thought the magic was incorporated, and again, partially includes Nina on the param, is when she turns Wyland into QE to take to the exchange with Wyland's father, Jan van Eyck, partially because they needed to exchange Huey because that's who they were rescuing, kidnapping, depends on the way you look at it, but also so Wyland could know what his father really thought of him, and also to kind of trick Van Eyck. I thought that was a fantastic application of the magic, and it tied in so neatly with the plot that they were able to keep the real QE safe away and not trading him to Van Eyck to do whatever he wants and make more of this awful, awful drug. But also just to give something more to Wyland as a character, because he doesn't get any POVs in this book. And what we do know is like little bits and pieces, mostly from conversations with Jasper, but we don't know much about him because we never end up in his head like we do the others. So getting this, learning that he has issues with reading and writing, which just, they sound like dyslexia to me. And I really hope that if it is dyslexia in the future, he's able to learn in a way that works for him and it's not just shoved at him the way that his father was trying to. And I think this gave more depth to him as a character because now we know a little bit more about him, besides that he is Van Eyck's son and that he is good with chemistry and bomb making and made some pretty great bombs that they set off, which was really good. So the actual heist was amazing. I loved every minute of it. I loved that even when things were going wrong, they were kind of going right. And I know that some people really would not like this, like at all, and it would just seem very convenient. It worked so well for me. I lapped that stuff up. Everything that was happening with Brom and Nina and Matthias and how they were kind of making it up as they go along, but also there was a plan in place with Kaz. But the point when Nina gets put in the cell and then Matthias's face turns up in the window. Oh, I did think it was real for a minute. Like I really thought that Matthias had actually betrayed them and that Nina was now captured. And I just loved when that wasn't the case. I loved when he turns on Brom and then rescues Nina, and it was so good. And the other thing that really jumped out as going wrong, but then like went right, was Inej when she is cornered by Helene and outed for not being part of the menagerie anymore, and actually a spy who works for Kaz, and they take her back to the prison. And I just love how it's covered. It's really hard to do characters that have information and not tell the reader that information. A lot of the time it can come across as if it's just being hidden for plot convenience and it doesn't make sense why it was hidden. Why didn't the audience know that? Why is this character not bringing this up or even ever thinking of it if we're in their head? But it made so much sense to me that Inej isn't thinking about the plan because she's just going through the motions and she knows she's going to get to where she needs to be. And she's just so consumed with her terror of Helene and everything she went through at the menagerie. And like this is brought up so many times in the story. So her having to face Helene again, particularly after being cornered in the alley while they were still in Ketterdam. Her fear, her terror, and also having to go back into the prison and it just feeling so much worse than the first time. Even if that's where she's meant to be, that doesn't take away all of those emotions that she would feel and the terror of being trapped. But then we find out that she's meant to be there. She was meant to be in that hallway with the giant glass, and then Jesper and Wyland come in and like they've all incapacitated the guards, and she stole the diamond from Helene's necklace. Incredible. I completely understand why she steals the diamond and she tucks it away, and then she's still thinking about it because she's thinking about how she's being taken back to the prison, and that's terrifying. Like, why would she think of a diamond in that case? But then, oh my gosh, Wyland just making a saw, like making a drill out of part of a diamond and a wrench or something. Fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic. And of course, then they all go through into this big glass house type thing where the Fjordans are just keeping all of their might so that they can terrorize the people walking past and show how strong they are. And they just steal a tank. They straight up, they get into a tank and they just take it. They take the tank. And she shoots out the glass. And I love Jasper getting into the tank, just being like, can I take over the guns? Because that's such a Jasper thing to do. And just the image of them picking up like Kaz and Nina and Matthias out of the river. And they're all holding on to the outside of this tank as they just drive through this town. And I could just imagine people around looking at them being like, what the hell's going on? Sure, we're in a place where there's lots of military people, but this is just a bit weird. Just a bit strange. The other thing that I really liked, and I think I will end mostly on this, which is great because it's the literal end of the book that I'm going to talk about, is the kind of open ending that we get, but it's also closing this story. I don't like open endings. It is very hard for me to find an open ending that I really like, because a lot of the time it feels like you could have closed something more while also leaving threads open. And I think this book did very well because this book is focused on the heist, and that part of the story is now closed. There's still things trailing off from that are for the sequel, but the actual heist and what they intended to do, what this book promised me, that bit is done. So I'm very glad. That is what I like when there is an open-ended book, because this book is done with some open endings that are sequel bait. That's totally fine by me. But I loved the final scene where they go to Pekka Rollins, because I was never going to expect that. When that scene started and we're in Pekka Rollins' head and he's talking about people being there, I'm like, it won't be them. There's no way Kaz would go to Pekka Rollins. And then Kaz goes to Pekka Rollins. Really was not expecting that at all. And I love that he robs him as well. That's such a screw you to Pekka Rollins, like such a small one. And just Kaz asking Pekka Rollins like multiple times throughout this book is like, do you know me? Then at the end it's like, no, should I? It's like, not yet. Oh boy, I cannot wait until these two clash and he finds out who Kaz is and why Kaz hates him and is after him. And I just love after they've all left, and I think Pekka Rollins is talking to a butler or someone else. Hang on, let me find it. Doherty, he said, Pekka Rollins said, I think we'd best say a prayer for Jan van Eyck. You think Brecker can best him? It's a long shot, but if he's not careful, I think that Murch might walk himself right onto the gallows and let Brecker tighten the noose. Rollins sighed. We better hope Van Eyck kills that boy. Why? Because otherwise I'll have to. Their showdown is going to be epic. It's going to be so good. Oh my gosh, I haven't even talked about Inej being captured yet. Oh my god, there's so many things in this book. I can't wait to see what happens with that and like see them do a rescue mission next. Rescue story for Inej. Showdown with Pekka Rollins, and something to do with Van Eyck. Those were the three things I wanted. Plus, like, you know, more character arc, more backstory. I'd love to get to know these characters more, particularly the ones we didn't get to know much of in this book. I have started the second book and very much enjoying it. We'll do another review like this once I have finished Crooked Kingdom. So I hope you enjoyed that review. If you did, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, all the usual jazz, and I'll see you next time.